Chad, you ready? Okay. Are you ready, Mayor? It's up to you.
Bill said he might be a little late, so we're still open up here.
You want to wait for Bill?
If you're ready, we can eat while we listen, right?
I think Stan, we're going to do the roll call, and then Stan wants to speak first. So I thought we'd just start getting that moving, because you don't have to talk while Stan speaks.
All right, well, the agenda calls for a roll call for present. So I'd ask Lisa first to take a roll call for all three committees.
For the Board of Aldermen, King, Whitus,
Here.
Simmons,
Here.
Akers,
Here.
Skanes, Milton,
Here.
C. Your Honor,
Here.
you have a quorum. For capital improvement, Skanes, King, Akers,
Here.
Dobbins,
Here.
Pinkley,
Here.
Buckley.
Here.
Your Honor, you have a quorum. For Budget and Finance Committee, Simmons,
Here.
Milton,
Here.
Akers,
Here.
Dobbins,
Here.
Yancey, Romine. Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we have someone zooming in? Do we have, okay. Presentation of the discussion of the proposed 2021 budget. First, Mr. Stan Dobbins.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the board, members of the Finance and Capital Committee. First and foremost, I've got to tell you that I wrote a speech for this, and anybody that knows me knows that I hate speeches. So I had some $10 and $5 words in that speech, and my mom would have been real proud, but my dad would have said I'm wasting time. So I threw it in the trash. And also, anybody that knows me knows that what I say comes from my heart, and I mean it. The day, and I think the only one that probably remembers this would be Bob Simmons. I think he was the only one that was there. The day I took over this job, I told him it was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. We had a considerable financial issue. I'll just leave it at that. Over the last 4 years that I have been doing this job, this city internally, every one of these directors, and in particular the finance department, has gone above and beyond to correct those financial problems we had that were not of their making. And we were moving forward. We've encountered some floods. This year, I've never seen anything like this in my life. In my former life, I actually drafted with great assistance, drafted the pandemic response plan for the entire county of Clay in Missouri, which is the 4th largest county in the state, to combat things such as this. I still have that, and I will tell you that it has really helped me deal with what we have kind of gone through here. But there are even things in it that this has opened my eyes to. COVID is not our friend, and we will be battling with it for some time. It's not over. Now, having said that, I want to get back to the fact that our ordinances require that each year I present you all a balanced budget. You will see a balanced budget again this year, and we have, Jamie works hard to actually bring that out over a 5-year period. I can't tell you or the citizens of this community, and this is the other thing that I say that I know people cringe when I say it, but I love the Board of Aldermen, but folks, I work for the citizens of this community. They are what are near and dear to my heart. I expect every penny of their tax dollars to be spent in the most efficient fashion that we can spend it. And I expect us to do what we really are, our ordinances say we're supposed to do, and that is provide sewer, water, streets, public works, engineering, our police services, our fire services, and our recreation department. And I could not be more proud of each and every one of these directors that leads their departments, because I think we do an exceptional job. I know that we have asked them to cut their budgets deep to the bone, and they've done that. I looked at Mike Ray the other day and I said, how much have you cut? And he looked at me and he said, $900,000. That's a lot of money, folks. And it's money that we hoped we had to use for infrastructure and capital items that we need to do. Now, there's still some things that we're going to spend some money on because we have to. If we allow our plan to disintegrate, then we allow the city to disintegrate, so to speak, and the infrastructure. And there's nothing quite as important to the community as its infrastructure, especially if it wants growth. We have businesses that want to come here. The planning department has done a wonderful job streamlining their process, and we have become so developer friendly that it's almost scary that I'm not having anybody scream at me. Having said all of that, we, even in this time, are still seeing positive attributes of the community. We've seen, just this last 2 weeks here, we've seen Hobby Lobby open. We have Aldi's that will be open in November, I believe it is. We have several other businesses that are building right now. I just shared a little joke with Keith a minute ago, because Keith told us that the octopus is going to be delayed a little bit getting it put onto the building out on 76. So I asked him if it was because it was having trouble swimming this far, but that is going to be a tremendous opportunity and growth opportunity for our community for visitorship, along with WonderWorks opening this year. I'm going through buying a house right now. I finally decided maybe I ought to live here and buy my own house and stop living in a rental house. So I can tell you that housing here is a challenge, and we're going to have to continue to meet that challenge. And to do that, we're going to have the infrastructure to do it. Developer doesn't want to show up and whether it's a subject building homes or it's somebody wanting to open a business, they don't want to show up and have to wait another 6 months for us to try to figure out how we're going to get sewer and water to them. Now, like I told you a minute ago, we're going to present you a balanced budget. This year is an anomaly. I'm not going to tell you it's been a great year. From the perspective of what we've seen in 2019, 2017, and 2018. But I'm going to tell you it's been a great year for me, because I've seen these people come together and take care of one another and take care of the citizens of this community with far less money and far less people than they need. We've been able to do that through priority-based budgeting. We internally have embraced priority-based budgeting. We have identified areas that we were able to reallocate funds to make sure that our citizens remained our priority, and we are continuing to do that. My challenge, so to speak, to you all is to remember that we need you to embrace priority-based budgeting as well, to provide guidance for us as well as the community to get the job done and take care of our residents. Now, nothing comes without a cost. That cost is either in money or human toil. I've got the folks here that have no qualms whatsoever doing the hard work. I know that this year financially is a challenge for the city of Branson. I live that every day. but I also know that we will come out of this. I am asking that you all understand that this is a very slim budget, but when we do come out of this, I will be coming back to you all with a balanced budget, but I will be asking to review our salaries for all of our employees, to review basically, and I have a team working on this right now, to review all benefits for our employees because they are the ambassadors for this city. The city of Joplin, and I don't like to compare us to anyone, but the city of Joplin just gave their employees a 9% pay raise. This year, because of our financial situation, you will see that we are not recommending a 2% cost of living increase for our employees. We are recommending a 3%, up to a possible 3% raise for employees dependent upon pay for performance, dependent upon their performance on their evaluation. I wish it could be more. It cannot be. I have already told our employees that, and I have not heard complaint one from them, because I've looked every one of them in the eye and I promised them that I will remember their sacrifices and I'll stand up here and take the hit when I come back to you all and ask for more money in the future to take care of them. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, other than I trust each and every one of you. I believe in each and every one of you, and I know in your heart you will do what is right for the citizens of this community, whether it's right for you individually or not. You will do what is proper for the community as a whole. And together we get through all of these challenges as one. Thank you, gentlemen, and I will turn it over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Stan. Jamie, I want to apologize to you. You asked if I would start our meeting in a prayer, and I did not do that, and I would like to stop now, especially since Stan has shared it. He was at the prayer breakfast this morning along with several other folks here from the city and started our day off bright and early, but it kind of helps us remember where things come from, doesn't it? So if you don't mind, I'd like to start in just a prayer.
Please do.
Just remain seated. Lord, again, we just seek you and seek to understand what your will is for us. Lord, these have been difficult times trying to seek through asking you and through asking each other and working with each other to try to do what's right for our community. We thank you for the employees of this community. We thank you for our Board of Aldermen and all those folks who have stakeholder interest, and particularly our citizens. That they see that we are seeking to do all we can do with what we have to work with. Lord, thank you for this time together that we'll discern and look at and plan and know that you're in charge. All these things we ask in the precious name of, yes, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So some of you have heard and seen this budget before, but I wanted to start off today, and I echo a lot of the things that Stan said with the budget and everything like that. I think everybody's worked extremely hard on this year's budget, and the one thing I want to maybe get your mindset moving in this direction is to think of, yes, this year, but also think of the effects that this year has on the future. So I will tell you that 21 and 22, they're not as bad, but my biggest concern is 23 through 25, okay? And I said that the last time, but I just want to preface it. This whole meeting, and I'm going to read you a couple of quotes before we get started, just so that you can understand that the numbers that we're projecting and the assumptions that we have created are not just on our own merit, and it's not just on us guessing and looking at the city of Branson's economy itself. So I'm going to read that to you, but I wanted to let you know that for the general fund and the water sewer fund and some of the major funds that require reserve balance in our codes. Typically what we do is I take 5 years out, and the revenues and expenditures, we balance them to zero. Operating revenues and expenditures, we balance to zero. And so it was a little bit of a challenge to do that this year, especially long-term. So the effects and the decisions that we make now for next year is going to have an impact on the long-term, and that's what I always want to get out of this meeting as well. So when I say 23 through 25, and we did balance those to zero in our major funds, the assumptions for those years to get that to balance to zero is zero. And by that, what I mean is no raise increases, no benefit increases, no expenditure increases. And I'm going to stand up here and tell you that is unrealistic. 23 through 25, that's the only way I could get the operations to balance to zero for our major funds. And those assumptions are not realistic. So the message today for me is that we have to start making different decisions in order to prevent those assumptions from becoming our real and our norm, if that makes sense to you all. Okay, so I'm going to go through the slide presentation really quick, but I have an investment advisor that we use on all of the investments that we do for the city. And he sends us an economic report, especially through this year, which I greatly enjoy. And it's the Bank of Kansas City, Bank of Oklahoma. They're a fairly large bank, and he is the senior vice president for their investments. And we have a good relationship, but their bank presents this economic report on a weekly basis, and he sends it to us. And so I got to talking to him yesterday, and I wanted to share some of the things that he sent me with you all so that you could understand that, yes, I know, and all of you know, that I am a very conservative person, and I have been talked about and those kind of things in the past, and I am okay with that. I'd rather be conservative than present you a budget that I don't believe is going to come to pass. So, but some of these things I'm going to read to you. And just this morning, Goldman Sachs sent out an article, and they lowered their fourth quarter projections from 6% to 3% due to a lack of further fiscal stimulus. So they have just redone their projections for the fourth quarter. The other thing is the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. He also gave us a quote, and he said, "I believe that the path of the pandemic will continue to present challenges that represent significant headwinds to economic growth." And he went on to say that while relief is running out, there is a pretty good significant chance that some of the temporary disruption and dislocation can become permanent. This just means that the hurdle that we have to climb is going to be much higher. And so as we've gone through this year, and we've already presented it to you all, the physical health report for COVID, which just simply means that we took the whole city, not just my department, took a look at the financial health regarding to COVID and what we thought we were going to be faced with. Grand scheme of things, that resulted to our projections of a 45% decline in revenues for both tourism and sales. And so, but looking at all of these financial experts in our country and what they're seeing and what they're doing is extremely helpful to us in how we project and what we look for. And I'm going to go on in this slide presentation to talk about the economy, and you'll see several of our comparisons here. But I wanted to start off by saying that just simply so that you could understand that when we put our projections together, we don't just look at Branson's history. We look at what's going on in our state, in our country, and even in the world if it's appropriate. And so we try to present the budget that's best going to represent what we believe the future will hold. Now, you've all heard this. Next year can kind of be an unknown because there's still a lot of things that have to take place And I believe they will. I believe there's hope for our country, and I believe that the Lord's still in charge. So with that being said, the cover of this magazine, I spoke to it in the Finance Committee too. It's not just a dead tree with the flowers sticking out of it, and we just didn't pick that picture willy-nilly. I picked the pictures specifically because this is a real tree within our city, and that big flower represents the hope for the future, and it represents growth, and it represents possibilities, and that's why we picked it for this specific year. So all these pictures that you're gonna see throughout our presentation and throughout the magazine, they're not just pictures that we threw in there. We do take time to look at them and hopefully represent what we're talking about then and there. So I believe that pictures speak 1,000 words, and so sometimes when I get too wordy or too slang, you can look at the picture and see what I'm trying to say. How about that? Okay, let's move forward. Here's the agenda we're going to go through. We're going to go through first our 2020 projections, then our revenue assumptions, our economic forecast, our expenditure assumptions, general fund expenditures, because that's our major fund, priority-based budgeting. I always hit on that. Fiscal year 2021 budget. We'll go through questions, and then Mike will come up and present the water sewer rates to you today. I will try to move through them. I know for many of you this is redundant, and but I just want to make sure that you all have the answers to any questions that you may want to ask, and please feel free to stop me and ask those questions. If you have the questions, I'm sure a lot of other people do, and I'll be happy to answer them at that time. So the next thing that we're going to go through is the 2020 projections. We've told you all of this before, but when we were putting our budget together, we went through and we looked at the COVID financial projections, and then what we did is we also looked at where we were at actually at the end of July. So we were conservative on those COVID projections, and I'm thankful for that, because what we are seeing is in our general sales, I don't believe we're going to end the year down 45% in general sales. I believe we're only going to end the year down to 2019 by 36%, which is good. We're coming up. And so when we looked at through July's actuals, then what we did is August through December, we kept them flat to our COVID projections, okay? So that's how we determined our projections for the year, and those still may hold conservative. Okay, so for the projections, the 2020 projections, we had a 3% merit and a 2% market or COLA, whichever you know it as. We also did a hiring freeze for 22 full-time positions, and that goes back to the COVID financials, okay? And that is how we determined our 2020 projections. And this economic forecast slide, we present this every year, and this is a little bit what I was talking about earlier and how we look at the economy. Kiplinger report, and it shows you, unfortunately, they don't release 5 years out at one time. They do release the 1 year, and so we always look at that as well. And then the Congressional Budget Office, that's what the CBO stands for, if you didn't already know that. We look at that one as well. We also always look at real U.S. GDP, the Federal Reserves, and we look at Missouri and where they're at in their budget and their projections as well. And so I just wanted to give you Kiplinger. The reason why we do that is they're one of the leaders in their business forecast, and I've just always looked at them, and that's why we get the comparison that we do. I do want to show you and point to you that the forecast for 2020, I just went over that and explained that to you. 2016 through 2019 on here, those are actuals, and that's where we ended the year at. And then the 2020 is the forecast, and that's the projected where we think we're going to end our sales tax growth at for the general sales, and then our tourism tax growth. I will tell you that as we speak right now, tourism is down 40.1%, which we came back a little bit from last month, and I think we'll continue to do that. So we may end up better than the down 45% in tourism. But it'll all depend on our next biggest season, which is Christmas. And then our sales tax growth, I just talked to you about, we trued that up. And so if you look at the 21 forecast, what you're gonna see is that an upswing, an uptick in 26.7%. I want to make sure that I don't confuse you here, because that is in comparison to where we believe we're going to fall in 2020. So if you think about it, we think we're going to end down 2020, which it's not just us, it's everybody, the country, everybody knows that, but we think we're going to end down by 36%, okay? 2021, based on our projections and based on where we think we're going to come back, we're going to be up 26% over the 2020 financials, which in comparison to 2019, we're still going to be down, but it means that we're closing that gap. And then 2022, we're going to be up another 20%, and we believe that by the end of 2022, we're going to start getting back to 2019 numbers. And the reason why we believe that is based on our projections, based on some of the reports we've read. What we've read is your revenue, yes, we're going to have a growth, but it's going to be a slow to moderate growth, and it's going to be a span of time that it's going to take us. And so 2022 and 2023 is where we're going to look to get back to normal. So that's really what that means, just for all of you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that, but I just wanted to let you know that 21, we're still going to be down to 2019, but slightly, and then 2022, we're going to look to get back to 2019 numbers, and then so on and so forth, if that makes sense. And then down there, you can see where we do the comparisons, and then it shows you the national growth and where Branson falls into the average and the comparisons. Does that make sense to you all? And if so, do you have any questions? Larry, go ahead.
Thank you for going through that. Just so I can understand on the Branson tourism tax growth, I know the forecast is written as down 45%. You're thinking it's going to be better than that. In the 2021, if we were down 45%, then in 2021, we're looking for basically a flat year, up 1% over the down year of 2020.
That is correct. And the reason for that is because when we researched it, and talking to my investment advisor, the air travel, some of the items that we talked about was the air travel. So through this year, and everybody knows this affects private and government, there's a lot of business travel that goes on through the airports. Well, a majority is being done through the internet and on Zoom and on all these meetings. So you've pretty much knocked out the business travel activity, which is hurting the air travel. And then there's other things that go into play with that. And so that's why for 2021, and that was on me, I made the decision we need to keep it as conservative as possible. And if it picks up quicker than the economy says, we're just that much better. Sure. And I'm hopeful that's the case, but that's why we projected where we did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions on that? Okay, so I will move forward. Here's our revenue assumptions for 2021. And I'll preface that by saying these are in comparison to 2019's normal, okay? 2019 was the last, I'll put normal in air quotes, year for us, so that's where we compared it to. So like Stan said, this year was an anomaly, so we wanted to paint a real picture for you. 22% decrease in sales tax in comparison to where we landed in 2019. 20% decrease in sales tax for the transportation fund in comparison to where we landed in 2019. 44% projected decrease in tourism tax in comparison to where we landed in 2019. And then a 19% decrease in sales tax in comparison to where we landed in 2019. I also will say that you tend to think about the transportation fund and the public safety fund as being the same. When we did the calculation, the public safety, because there's a little bit of difference because the public safety fund took a little bit of time to get started. It's 19.4% versus 19.9%. So it's a difference, that's where that difference falls. And these are the assumptions that we use to build the budget for 2021. Here is the revenue sources broken out for you all, and this is where the 2021 budget falls. 33% of the, and this also includes transfer ins to those specific funds. So 33% for general fund, 17% for water sewer, 5% for parks, 14% for tourism, 20% for public safety, and 11% for transportation. This is a picture of all of the funds that we've got and how they're split out by fund. Public safety's higher than transportation because of the subsidy that the general fund provides, and so on and so forth, okay? And we always like for you to see that so that you can get a picture of the funds and where they relate and manner of revenues. We'll do that with expenditures here in just a few minutes as well. And here's our assumptions again. No market wage, as Stan's already spoken to many of these things, but I'll just reiterate them for you. We do have the 3% merit, and that is based on the anniversary date. We've got in the budget right now that you are looking at $180,000 for the health department, a parks subsidy of $750,000, a convention center subsidy of $400,000. We still have in there the Graham Clark Airport of $10,000, the Ballparks of America of $290,000, the subsidy for the public safety of $5.89 million. The social service agencies I have in there at $100,000. Housing Authority is the $90,000. We were blessed this year not to have a health insurance increase, which we're thankful for. We have one-time expenditures in the general fund of $34,000 and Taney County Partnership of $10,000. Those are the main things that we highlight. Is there any questions right now on these assumptions? Yes, sir.
On the convention center, I think that's going to maybe one of our largest swings. Have you had input from the convention center on trying to verify that that $400,000 is in line with what they're thinking?
Yes, sir. And so they've sent us their budget already, and we sent it back to them, and we've already had those conversations. And essentially, I believe their loss, their total loss is around $900,000 that's projected for 2021, and $400,000 of that is operational, and they're going to use about almost the whole $500,000 this year for marketing purposes. So it's split up between two funds. One of them is general fund, the other one is tourism. And they're going to present their full budget the night that we present this to you all for first reading.
Okay, so thank you. For clarity, I know they haven't been using the 500.
Right.
So when we look at their number, it's going to say a $900,000 loss, but $500,000 of that comes out of the tourism tax.
It does, and they've shown that it's like $498,000 or something like that of marketing, and you'll see that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions or concerns on these assumptions at all right now? None? Okay. This is public safety expenditure assumptions. Most of the funds, we kept the same assumptions as far as personnel goes, but I would also like to reiterate some of them to you. Again, no market wage adjustment, the 3% raise here. We also did keep money in there for the police department for the vehicles because, you know, we're on that lease cycle, and this is one of the first years this next year where some of the lease cars come off and then we roll them on. And so we were able to do that and keep them going so that 2 and 3 years down the road, they don't get bottlenecked and we have to buy 8 to 10 vehicles at one time. That would not be a financially wise decision. So it's better to do this on an annual basis, keep them going in their cars so that they don't have the troubles that they might run into in the future. This also includes the payment on their Motorola contract for their radios as well. So we were able to keep those in there also. This is a look, same thing that we did for the revenue assumptions. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. These are the split out of expenditures by fund, and you can see We always talk about the general fund. That's because that's our major fund. That's 30%. Water sewer is 25%. Parks is 5%. Tourism is 12%. Public safety is 18%. And then transportation is 10%. Parks, their revenue is 5%, their expenditures are also 5%. They have the subsidy with the general fund, and they do a good job with their fees, but it's 5% on revenue, 5% on expenditures, so you can see that. Okay, I gotta go back. I wanna show you all this. This will be a little break for you. I'm gonna go back real quick. This transition of this picture. And so I like to talk about pictures and I like to talk about color. I have kids at home, but I think it's important. Stan, just give me a little bit. Okay, so it transitions from the Titanic into the landing and the Christmas. And that just really talks about our tourism to me and everything that Branson has to offer. And so I just thought it's beautiful and it's a great transition. We're transitioning right now into Christmas. So anyway, I know, but I love it. Okay, general fund expenditure breakdown. Here's how the general fund, I've talked about the general fund being our major fund, and here's how it breaks down. 58% is wages and benefits, 3% is commodities. This year we do no capital. Contractual is 36%, debt is 3%, and that debt is the energy performance agreement that's still hanging on, but only 2 more years, okay? And anybody have any questions on that at all whatsoever? And I know we sent the detailed budget out by line item to you all last week. If you have any questions regarding those and you want to ask them, please feel free to do that too. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Okay. And then we transition into physical health and the priority-based budgeting. And I've already spoken about this a lot, but I'm going to speak about it again because I don't think I can speak about it enough. And that is, we're in, Stan's already talked about it. I thought he did a really good job of this. This is priority-based budgeting, and this is the tools that we have, and it's an amazing process. It is a great financial tool, and there are cities all across our country that are moving toward this because of this year. There was already a lot on it, but there was a lot more that were interested through the COVID time and through the shutdown time. We had a ton of webinars. I got a lot of calls from other cities on how it works. We were able to share our information as well, and some of the cities are really looking at this as, yeah, this is a great tool to have, especially during years like this. We always have, like Stan said, we had tornadoes, we have floods, we have all of these things, and this city's done a great job of emergency preparedness, and I think the fire department and everybody does a great job of that. And I will just say that I think this tool is the key, but it has to be used for that purpose, so then when we're making decisions on where to spend the money and we're making decisions on what we need to do, or we have these programs that are low-hanging fruit that don't really meet our goals and objectives, the decisions fall back on you all. I can present you the facts and I can show you where the future lies and what we need to do, but I don't make those decisions. That's you, and that's why we have this tool, so that it equips you to better make good financial decisions for the future. This is an explanation on the different funds, what they are, what the reserves hold. That's why we like to put it in there, to keep it front and center. And here is an explanation. And all of this, I put all of the magazines, all of the aldermen should have theirs now. It's in your mailboxes if you don't. And I laid the committees all out on the table. We do these, and I will give you a little bit of history. We started doing these back middle of 2012, 2013. And that was the big budget book that we have to present, and we do that for Government Finance Officers Association. We present that. That is a massive book, and it's a lot of financial detail, and it's a lot of history of our city. It's a good read, I think, if you're interested in having a good read, but not everybody enjoys that kind of reading. So we tried to break it down a little bit to what's a little bit better reading, and it really gets your attention, and it moves back to the goals and objectives that we were given by our community. So that's really what this magazine's all about. So here's the general fund, and here's how it looks, and we talked about the 21 through 24, if you'll notice. We did balance those to zero, and this graph shows that. But as I stated earlier, we need to watch the 23 through 25. I'll probably state that 14 times in this presentation because I think it's that important. The decisions that are made now, it's time to look at our programs and services at a point in time where we know that our revenues are not going to grow at a rapid pace for the next 5 years. Our expenditures are going to. What we spend that costs $1 now in 2 to 3 years is going to cost $5. So your expenditures are growing at a much faster pace than your revenues. That's not a good picture for anyone. So the intent for me saying all this is we've got something to do. If you think about you're going to have a 10% swing in expenditures and a 2% swing in revenues in 2 years, you got an 8% gap that you got to do something about. And if we don't have new revenues, and the departments have done an amazing job of cutting and doing without, it's not going to work long term. They cannot keep functioning at the pace that our community wants them to function on at a bare bones budget. So then the idea goes back to, what do we do? Well, what we do is we use the priority-based budgeting tool to make the proper decisions now so that our future is sustainable. Again, that's my professional recommendation, and I'm not the decision maker. That's just the way I'm trying to help see the future and what we need to do. Here's the graphs. And I allude to, and you can see where the reserve is, and based on how if we balance the operations, your reserve is left alone. Now, your reserve will decrease for capital expenditures and for one-time expenditures because we balance the operations. The reason why we do that is because in a year like this year is a perfect example. We have the budget and we have the operations. What does it take to keep our city going operationally? That's your operations. The capital and the one-time expenditures are things that can be cut if needed in an economic downturn or a pandemic year or a tornado year or anything that might hit us. We're prepared to know what are the first things that we can do without in order to keep our city operating as our citizens expect us to. That's why we do the way we do it, and that's what this picture will show. If we can balance it to zero, then you have the decision to make about capital and one-time expenditures. Like I said earlier, 23 through 25, not realistic assumptions. So even though we've presented it as a zero operational, we still have decisions to make because we can't sustain no raises. It's not realistic to think the health insurance is not going to increase, and it's not realistic to think that your expenditures aren't going to increase because everything we've read has said inflation's coming. So those are the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about all of these and the budget. And I'll go through these funds because I've already went through them a lot with the other committees, but I'll just hit the highlights and please stop me if you have any questions or concerns. So personnel expenses for the general fund account for 58% of operational expenditures. 58 to around 64% is really, for personnel, is about the norm. Here's a look at the public safety. Public safety, we drew it out a little bit longer. So if you look at the 25, it's been balanced to zero and then out. We showed this because this was a concern given that we have some large projects coming up. We want you to see this so that we have some difficult decisions that we're going to have to make to be able to change this picture because, as you can tell, by 26, expenditures are outpacing revenues. And one of the things in the Finance Committee, Mr. Simmons, I believe you said it doesn't look like the revenues, the projected revenues are changing at all. We went back in and looked at them. They're changing by 1%, which is ever so slightly in terms of 18 million, and that's where we stayed. So they are changing. It's just hard to see on the graph because of the gap of the graph. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But the 1% is our decision, yes.
Yes.
Jamie, I had a question on it shows 7.7 as the transfer in, on the previous slide, I think it was 5.9.
Yes, that's a difference. So the, hang on one second. You're talking about tax and additional annual transfer in from the general fund.
Go to the previous slide, under the general fund.
Oh, on general fund?
Yes, see on the right-hand column there, we're 5.9 million out of the general fund for public safety.
Yeah, that was because of COVID. So that's a 25% reduction. I'm sorry. I was having a hard time following you, but I see it. For this year and for next year, I believe we didn't make the subsidies whole until '23 because we brought them back up as the revenue came back up. But you'll see in '21, it's a 25% reduction too. So the typical transfer is almost 7.7 million for public safety. The same for parks, it was about $1 million. And so we reduced that by 25%, which was 750 for parks, and this 5.9 for public safety. Does that make sense to you? Okay, you're welcome.
Jamie?
Yes, sir.
I assume that if we were to see better results or unexpected results in the middle of next year or something, that we could change that at that time, right?
Certainly. We've already talked about it. John and I had that conversation through email, I believe, yesterday. And so I think what we need to do is just mid-year, around July. And what that'll do is that'll give us time to get our audited numbers out of the way, the audit presented by the end of June. Then we take another look at it, see where we're sitting, and do similar to what we did this year with the COVID financials. If we're doing better, fantastic, let's look at that. If we're not, we stay the same or decrease if necessary, but I don't think that'll happen. But yes, sir, that is in the plan once the audit is done to look at that again. Okay, so the public safety, I'm sorry, I keep taking my glasses off and I realize I can't see without them. Okay, so police personnel expenses are at right now 91.4% of their departmental expenditures, and fire are 88.9% of their departmental expenditures. That's high, so that's something we can also look at as well. Parks Fund, and all of this is in your magazines as well, and if you want me to stop and read through it, I will, but I know that you've all already looked at it. Parks personnel expenditures are 65% of their departmental expenditures. Transportation Fund, you can see the picture. Just remember that we balance to 0 through 25. That's why you're seeing those lines come together. And as I stated, 23 through 25, we got some decisions to make. Okay, so the transportation funds is our public works. You can see that graph. You can see that their personnel expenditures are only 35% of their total operating. Is there any questions? And then here is the priority-based budgeting. And I show this to y'all all the time, and so I won't go through. But for some of you who are new to the process, I want to explain the process briefly. I know it's redundant for some of you, but essentially what has happened is we were tasked with needing to find a new way to budget. We're a tourism city, and not as much diversification as some of the other cities. So how do we budget and be in a large tourism city, and how do we do that? So we started doing the research years and years ago, I believe it was 2012, and what happened is we found a new way, and it's really not a new way, it's really a process that we all probably use in our own homes, okay? So essentially what's happened is we have our community plan. We had a leg up on this process because we were given a community plan which involved our own citizens, and they told us what they wanted to see over a period of time in that community plan. Then what happened on the process is that the Board of Aldermen at that time went through the community plan, and they summarized that into 10, what we called at the time 10 big rocks, or the 10 goals that summarized the community plan. Then those were given to the directors and the assistant directors to do a workshop, and what we came together and we defined those goals according to our understanding of what those goals were and the community plan. We then submitted those definitions back to the board. They looked at them, and we eventually came to the definitions that were given to us and the goals. So that's where, when you'll see the map results, you'll see a goal in the middle, and then you'll see all the definitions around it. After that process was done, then all of the directors took their departments and they went through and they itemized all the programs that they provide. So my department, we went through, we got a group of us together and we sat down and we did our own workshop, as did all of the other departments. And we had over almost 890 programs combined that we provide the city. Then what we did is we looked at the staff that provided those programs, and they told us how many staff it took and what staff it took to get that program completed. And then we in our department, because we have payroll in our department, we put a dollar value to it based on the salaries of the staff. So now we know all of the programs that are completed for the citizens of this city, and we know how much each program cost. Okay? And then once that is done, then based on the goals and the definitions, the department heads first went through and they scored all of their programs back to the definitions. Scoring it, many of you have had the opportunity to be involved in the scoring process for the capital, which I'm really thankful for because it helps you really understand the process. But the department heads went through that same process and they looked at every one of their programs and they scored it back to the goals. Yes, this has 2 or 3 more, this meets 2 or 3 more of their definitions. This is rated high, this program is. Or, no, this really doesn't meet any of the definitions and we're not really sure why we're doing this, and so they score it low. I'm just summarizing a very lengthy process. So once the department heads had all of their programs scored, then they go to a peer review, and each goal has their own peer review program. So, and that's made up of several of the different departments within our city staff, and they come together, and there was one person from finance to facilitate those meetings, but that committee for each goal looked at all of the programs and told, based on the definitions, where they thought the results were in. So now you have a peer review team score and you have a department head score. And then we combined those and we looked at them, and there were very few that wavered, but the committees met 5 times and they were able to bring in the people that would be able to answer those questions. They brought them in. They were able to get all their questions answered before they made the score. So now we have the department score and we have the peer review score, and you're able to look at that. And so you know that it's just not the department being biased on their program. We had an external committee look at that and give us a score as well, and those scores lined up, and that's why you have a program now, you have the cost of the program, and you know how that program relates in order to accomplishing the goals and objective that were given to us through our community plan. And now we can tell you on an annual basis, and we update that program every other year, and on an annual basis, we can tell you how much money we spent toward achieving those goals and objectives, and we do that in this magazine. Okay, it's a lengthy process that we've gone through, but I wanted to give you just kind of a breakdown of what we do and why. So essentially, it's supposed to be a decision-making tool so that you can look, and some of the low-hanging fruit, I call it low-hanging fruit just for a lack of a better term, but some of the low-hanging fruit that doesn't score very high in order to achieving our goals and objectives, it could be something that we've just always done and we're not sure why we do it, but we've just always done it. Those kind of things. Those are programs that maybe we need to look about cutting, or maybe we need to look at if there's a private company out there that can do it so that we don't compete with our private business, or a public-public partnership that maybe we can do to save us money on the program. There's all kinds of decisions that we can ask, and I'll go through the questions here in a second. And this talks about the impact on repurposing budget dollars. I've already spoken on that a little bit. And this really, if you want to see how we have rated and ranked, we won an award last year. We, the city of Branson, won an award last year because we were able to reallocate 10%. And I will tell you, some of that came from the Parks Department, some of that came from the Fire Department, some of that came from the Police Department, so on and so forth. So that tells you that the directors, they have the process in mind and they know how to use it, and they're doing it. So we were able to win an award it's with all the cities in the country that are doing this program. The city of Branson won an award, and I thought that was a good achievement and something that's worthy of repeating. And here's policy questions to ask. And this is just an example for you all. Are we over-providing too high mandate programs with low relevance? Essentially, what's that mean? Is the program, is it mandated, and if so, to what level? Is it a federal mandate that we have to do it? Is it a state mandate that we have to do it? Is it our city codes, or is it really just a best practice that we do because we want to do it? So if you have a federal and state mandate, that's a pretty high mandate that we have to do it. But are we over-providing for that service because of that mandate? Or can we reduce some of the service level, or can we reduce how much money we're putting to that program and still meet that mandate? A lot of what we do, and you can look at it yourself and test me on this, but a lot of the programs that we do, a majority of them are best practice. Are we over-providing to our self-imposed mandates? Self-imposed mandates are, our city codes. You all are the ones that change those city codes. You all are the ones that look at it. So if we needed to, can we examine our own mandates, and can we reduce them, and at what level? Again, are there service sharing options with other political organizations? I think of this as a public-public partnership. We have one, Biosolids, the Biosolids Coalition, that is through our water sewer department, where several different municipalities get together and use this, and I think that's a great example of that. The other example is our health department. That's through the county, and that's a public-public partnership. We provide them money, and they do us a service. That's a public-public partnership. It would cost us a whole lot of money to have that department here within the city, so instead of doing that, we do a public-public partnership, reduces our costs, and we get a good level of service. That's an example. Those are examples of that. Public-private partnerships, and we talk about the Branson Convention Center. This is an example, but they have we have a private management company who has experience and expertise in running convention centers, and we partner with them because we don't. So we partner with them so that they can give us the highest quality of a convention center and bring groups and economic impact to our city that benefits our entire city. So that's a private-public partnership. We provide them a subsidy, and they provide us a service that the intent is to bring people into our city to really enhance all of the businesses around. The next one, are there programs best provided by private sector? Sometimes we do a service because we've always done it, and we need to look at, is this a service that a private company does already and can do it at a lower cost or a better cost? And is it beneficial for the city to still provide it? And the quickest example I can see, it might not be popular, but it's the recycle center. We've got, the recycling. We have curbside recycling that's offered by a private business, those kind of things. But that's an example that we use. That could be a private sector business that's available to our citizens that maybe we look at not doing anymore. The next one is, if we want to keep lower performing programs, is there an opportunity to recover those costs? that would be fee increases. And I know that's really not a popular topic, but that is one of the policy questions to ask. So typically what we do here in this city is we've presented this to you many times, and a lot of you that sit on the Finance Committee will be very familiar with our fee structures and how we do them. And I know that I'll use the Health Department as an example because I thought Lisa Marshall did a really good job. She brought, years ago when she started, she brought the Finance Committee, well, we need to increase our fees. And what she did, she followed our fee process and increased the fees to 90% of service over a 3-year period so that it wouldn't be too much of a jump in 1 year to our citizens. That's what we like to do. We keep them, the John Hancock says we can't collect any fees over the 100% of what it cost us. So we keep them, and we have done this in the past, at 90% of service level, so we have that 10% cushion there. But there are some fees that right now we may not be collecting, or some other fees that we really need to look at and get it up to that 90%. I know of several that we really need to look at and start looking at if we are going to keep these lower performing programs. And I'll use the recycle center again because I've already used it. If we're going to keep these lower performing programs, you need to look at increasing those fees to offset the cost. Because otherwise we don't have the option of really gaining revenue. It's gonna be a slow crawl, and we're gonna increase, and eventually we're gonna get back to where we were, but it's gonna be slower paced. Really slower paced. So we need to look at some of these things, and they're not popular, and I'm just providing factual information. It's not my decision to make, but it's my job to give you the best possible information so that you can make those decisions, and that's why we're going through them today. Here's your 5-step process overview. I won't go through that again because I've already gone through it for you, but if you have any questions after you read it, please let me know. And then here is what we call our results maps. This is what I was talking about. Your goal is in the middle, community character, and all the bubbles around it, those are your definitions. And that's how we score our programs, and that's how we come to the score that we have. Each one of these, we break it down for you in graphs, spending level, most, more or less, how much money we provide, and what department really does the job of providing that service. And I know I've already gone through these, so I'll go through them again. Safety, health, and socioeconomics, and there is your definitions behind that one. And there's your graphs behind it. I'm just gonna go through these very quickly because we've already gone through them, but the goal is arts, culture, and education, and there's your definitions behind that. And a lot of the other cities, and I've said this before, a lot of the other cities, you'll be surprised, most cities have the same goals. I mean, economic development, safety, community character, those land use, all of those are pretty common that you'll see as goals in other cities as well. Economic development, who doesn't want economic development? And again, there's our spending and how we come to that. Infrastructure and environment. This is a necessity, and there's the definitions behind it. It's important to have great roads. It's important to have paved roads, clean roads, great sidewalks that don't have holes in it so that don't injure people, all those kind of things. Good, strong bridges that people can drive across. Everything that is directed back towards safety of our citizen, beautification, all of those things is what we strive for here in Branson. Tourism, again, we're 80+% tourism. And so what do? So I thought this picture was really good to go along with tourism because it's not, Fritz's is a good thing, and I will tell you, I got 3 kids, and my kids love going to Fritz's. And it may not be an economic driver, but it's an economic satisfier. So families with children, they look at places to go that provide fun things for their kids to do too. Not just adult stuff to do, but fun things for their kids to do as well. We travel for sports, and in fact, I'm leaving here when we're done and going 2 hours away to a volleyball tournament. And it's fun for the kids because that's where families travel, where their sports are and stuff, and they want to know that there are other things to do while they're there. Parks, open space, and recreation, again, that goes back to sports, that goes back to nature, riding your bikes, good trails, all of those things fall under that goal. And a lot of cities, again, have some of these same goals. Land use, I've already talked about. Transportation, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Transportation as well, that goes back to your roads and your streets, and taking care of what we have. If we don't maintain and take care of what we have, you're gonna have to pay out a whole bunch of money down the road because you're gonna have to build it new. So you got to put money into it to take care of what you have so that it'll last a long time. Good governance, that speaks to a lot. That speaks to the IT services, the Wi-Fi, it speaks to finance department, the clerk's office, it speaks to our legal department, it speaks to our planning and development department. Yes, sir.
Those planning's not on there.
Huh?
I didn't see planning. Oh, you're not on the next slide, sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry.
Separate.
What are you planning?
Listed under good governance, different departments and their
Governance.
measure. Next,
Oh, you mean the graph?
yes. Right there.
Well, let's see, that would fall under probably, I will look into that, but that'll fall under the administration, but let me look. It could mean that it didn't rank as high, but I will definitely look at that.
I'm just curious because you
Yeah, no, it's a good question, certainly.
see it there.
We just pull it straight out of our PBB tool, so I'll look into it. And then, so this is really the end of the road for me. No, it ain't. I mean, it's the end of my presentation. So it's just it's a quote. Budget tells us what we can't afford, but it doesn't keep us from buying it. So that's a message for today and for the future. Yes, I got a whole lot of examples about that, but I will say to you all that in this time, I was very, very thankful for this city pulling together as it did earlier in the year. I'm very blessed to work for this city. I'm very thankful for it, that my family can be raised in this city. And we were able to see, even though it was a lot of work, we were able to see the results of being conservative and good planning. We had the reserves there that we needed to help our city be sustainable during this period. And I was able to look at other cities and compare. So if you do that, and if you look at other cities across this country and you compare what they're having to go through this year versus what we are, it might not be as great of a picture. You guys might look at this and think this is not a great picture, but if you look at other cities and compare it to what they're having to go through, I would argue that it is a better picture than most, okay? But here's what I will say about that as well. We got to stick to the budget. So we have budget amendments, all of these things when we present you a balanced budget. The budget amendments that I have to bring or have to do throughout the year, unless it's like an emergency or something, every budget amendment that we have to do takes that balanced budget from being balanced to being unbalanced because it's expenditures, okay? So if it's not an emergency or something like that, I would just challenge you to, and I know I'm the one that presents the budget amendments, but I would also challenge you, and during these next couple of years, start thinking about those things. And again, I'm not the decision maker, I'm just the fact presenter. So that is my presentation for the budget. Again, I've got all of the budget summaries in the back, and we sent out the line item budget so that you all could see every line item, but every department. You could see where we fall, where the summaries lie. And we showed you also in this magazine and in several other documents where the percentages fall and how we took it out to 2022 and where they would fall. I will, before I leave right now, I will say, and challenge us, we need to use the PBB tool to make better decisions for the future, and we need to look to 23 through 25. One thing that Stan said that I think is ever so important is the salaries. We are receiving articles that Walmart, this is public information, so I can state this. So we are receiving articles that Walmart's going to start paying their people $18 an hour. We're receiving articles that Hobby Lobby is paying theirs $17 an hour. Target's more than 15. Some of the fast food restaurants are jumping up to 13%. That is just where our country is going. So we're going to have to stay competitive with all of our professional jobs and keep that gap between retail jobs and the professional jobs in the market. So that's something we got to think about long-term as well, too. And that's something that Stan and all of them are already working on, but I thought I would just elaborate on that as well. So those are things that we have got to think about also in the future that are going to have an impact on those future years. With that being said, I'll stop talking and I will ask any questions.
Stop you just a second. You mentioned the Hancock Amendment. There's probably very few of us in here that are old enough to remember the Hancock Amendment, but it was Mel Hancock, not John Hancock.
Right.
John Hancock's a little older.
Did I say John? I'm sorry. Well, at least you know I know my history. Oh, way to catch that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Yep, Claire?
That's funny, I didn't catch it either, but John Hancock must have been a very, very wise man.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you for that, Jamie, and obviously, looks like every department is doing their share, cutting to the bone on our budget. A few questions. You've mentioned, like you said you were going to mention about 14 times, the concern about 2023 and 25. I'm uncomfortable looking at a 5-year budget and today openly admitting that's not realistic. Because in 23, 24, 25, it's not realistic for expenses not to go up. It's not realistic for all those things that you mentioned. What's your thoughts on presenting a 5-year budget with some of those things that we know are not realistic? And obviously what'll happen is we'll end up not balancing, but are those things we should be addressing today so it does balance? Because like you said, 23 through 25 just can't happen. So instead of accepting, here's something we know that can't happen, something more realistic.
It's a really good question. So one, thank you for that, because we don't have to present the 5-year, and I look out at a 5-year gap so that I know that where we're headed, so that when I mention the 23 through 25, you know you won't see it here because you will only be voting on the 2021 budget for next year, but I wanted to allude to you, and certainly I can do that. It will be way out of balance. And why I mention that and why I bring it up is because some of the decisions that we make today, or some of the approvals that we do today, or some of the anomalies that come before you, I wanted to get your mind to that point of how does what we're doing right now affect long-term results? And that's really why I presented it and why I state it, because, you know, inflation and all of those things, some of the things and the items that we put into place right now is going to grow. The expenses are going to grow and going to grow, and it may not be a doable thing in the future, so we need to start thinking about that long-term planning. That's what it was about. I don't know if I answered your question properly, but I wanted to explain it.
Okay. Again, if we know the end result is not achievable,
Yes.
today may be the time, this year, next year, may be the time to start making some of those decisions so it is realistic in the 5-year forecast.
Absolutely, and I think one of the answers to that is looking to our revenue growth. So like next year when we look at mid-year and how we're doing, you know, as well as I do, next year's kind of an anomaly, but we have to do the best we can with the projections that we're given. And so I think next year in July, when we take another look at what we're faced with and where our economy is going, I think it certainly behooves us to look at our programs. And I will tell you, the answer to your question is you got to look at those programs and look at the programs that don't meet our goals and objectives at a high standard and start asking those policy questions. Is there another company that can provide this? Is there a partnership that we can enter into that will save us money but provide the same service? All of those policy questions, that's your answer to your long-term results, is the what are our programs? Where do they score? And is this something that we can do without and another business can profit from it? Or is this something that we just need to do without because we've always done it and change is hard, but we need to start making those tough decisions? And I will say the programs is where those decisions will have to fall, because we can't make more revenues right now than what we already are, and they're going to grow at a much slower pace than the expenditures do. So that'll be your answer to that. And one more thing to remember is when we did the fiscal health, the financial for COVID, if you remember, we went through and redid all of that. We said for every month that we're down or closed, it's going to take us 5 to 6 months to recover. And really, these financials show that. So you're going to be about a recovery of 20 to 24 months to get back up to full operations. And these really show that. So when you're thinking about that, you want to look at your programs, look at where they score, look at their cost. That's where those decisions need to come in. And they're hard decisions to make, and they're not always popular decisions, but we need to be looking at what's the best for the community at the whole, and that's where I would say the programs are your best bet to look.
Sure. And on that same note, it may be healthy, because I know you've worked diligently with all the department heads on reducing expenses. I'm wondering what the exercise would look like if you went back to the directors and asked the questions, are there any things we can do to help increase revenues? And my example is, a few meetings ago, we talked about raising the fees for events, right? So raising the fees for the events is a small amount of money for a department to try to stay budgeted, but bigger picture, if we encouraged more events, possibly by reducing the hurdles for events to come to Branson, that will generate more general revenue funds at a much greater rate.
I would say that's a good answer. Increasing fees, I will tell you that there are fees that we don't charge that we should. And that's a typical common practice for other cities. So we'll have to look at that, and we'll have to look at the hurdles as well. I think both of those combine. I know animal control and all these things, there's fees that need to be charged or at a certain level that we look at all the time that these directors would fully support. So yes, that's a good answer. And as you'll see these different directors come up probably in the next 6 months and start presenting some of that. And I want you to keep all of what we had this discussion in mind when you vote on that, because that's why they're doing what they're doing and presenting it to you all, because they're trying to find a way to help long-term results as well.
Sure, sure. Where do we stand for our 2019 audit?
It's pretty much done. I'm working on finishing up the notes, and hopefully it'll be presented, what's this month, September? By October.
Okay.
And then we'll turn around and have another audit next March. COVID was just a strange year. And there was a delay in the audit selection, so that both of those helped push out the audit. But we're getting that wrapped up too. At the same time, we're getting the budget wrapped up, and so then we'll be able to move forward into our holiday season.
Okay, I noticed in your presentation that there was $0 allocated to capital improvements. And this board has been having discussions of increasing our bonding capacity, which we have to go back to the voters for. Would that, if that bonding capacity gets raised, will that help with the capital improvements that are not being done?
So essentially, what that'll do is renew the tourism tax at the same time, and then the bonding capacity will give us the capacity to go out and bond for future water, sewer, infrastructure projects. We'll still have to pay the debt service on that from the tourism tax, but we'll be able to bond and get our infrastructure up to where it needs to be. So I don't know that it'll give us more money. It's all depending on the tourism and how it comes in, but it'll give us a larger capacity of which to work with. But it will also give us more debt. So we're going to pay off some debt, but we're going to have the ability to bond more if needed in the future.
We can do what every other household does. You borrow money to make your payments. So you increase your bonding capacity.
La, 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 la.
No.
Jamie, I want to thank you for all the work you've done, what all the departments have done. It was a sobering presentation, but I agree it's real world, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It took a whole bunch of people to create it, so you're very welcome.
Mr. Simmons has a question.
Yes, sir.
Well, just a more specific question. Our community service fund, last year, I believe that we increased that from $60,000 to $100,000. By we, I mean the board did. And if you could refresh my memory, or if you know.
Absolutely.
My memory says that we only let contracts for $80,000.
80,000, yes, sir.
Do you know if that was, how much of that has been used? I know we're not done with the year yet, but.
Certainly. So I printed it off before I came to this meeting, and I'll just refresh your memory of what agencies were elected: Boys and Girls Club, Christian Action Ministries, Faith Community Health, Elevate Branson, formerly known as Jesus Was Homeless, Branson Regional Arts Council, Taney Hills Community Library, the Salvation Army, and the Women's Crisis Center. And the contract amount total was $80,000 for all of those. Year to date, only $28,800 has been reimbursed. There's $51,000 left.
When is the appropriate time for the board to discuss that? To me, we shouldn't budget this year over the $80,000 and free up that 20 for other needed items, but the board probably needs to do a discussion on that, since the board's the one that changed it.
Certainly, and if now is the time, this is the special budget meeting, and what we can do, if you guys tell me what direction you want to go, we'll revise it before we bring it back to you for first read. And what that will do is if you elect to say, instead of 100,000 to move it back down to 60, that'll add $40,000 to the reserve. Does that make sense? Certainly. So now is the time. If you want to choose to tell me to reduce that, just let me know, and y'all have that discussion, and we'll take care of it for you.
Well, based on the fact we've only spent $28,000 so far out of it, it would be and this is an unusual year. I mean, undoubtedly, each of those organizations is having an unusual year also. However, I would think in our budget, I would like to see us go back to the $60,000. Or at least to the $80,000, since we didn't even have it contracted beyond that. Everything else has taken a reduction, the general fund stuff, even safety, public safety has taken 25% reduction out of the general fund to their funds. And,
certainly.
So I don't see why that one shouldn't also take that kind. And those programs, I'm not challenging the need for those programs or whether or not that's a policy that we should have. I'm just challenging the amount in this particular year.
Yeah, I'll give you the stats for a normal year. And so typically what we see, because of the close of the year, and so obviously, December is our last month of the year for fiscal year as well, too. So we give them until the third week of January to have all their reimbursements turned in. And so for what I call, I hate saying normal year, but what I call the last full year that we've had for 2019, all was spent of the $60,000, but $800. So a lot of the times they typically wait until closer to the end of the year to turn in their receipts and those kind of things. So just because it's only $28,000 now, they may just not have had the workers or whatever to turn in some of those receipts. So that's all. I just wanted to make sure that reality there.
And that's one thing I would say is I know there is, in particular, there is one group that has reached out to us because they were closed and they could not utilize those funds that I believe they will utilize, and we have given them extra time to get it done. So I think that what Jamie said is completely accurate. I think that we will see probably close to the $80,000 get spent.
I would hope so.
So Bob, I know we approved the 100, but then we only allocated the 80. I would be supportive of it in this time, making an $80,000 figure, not the 100. I don't know what everybody else feels.
If it's appropriate in the action during this meeting for this, obviously it's the Board of Aldermen. We do have 4 aldermen here, so we have enough here to be able to vote. Motion could be made in a second. I don't know, is there any public announcement that needs to be done in a public meeting?
I mean, can you just simply give me direction to change it and bring it back? Do you have to vote on it, or can you just say it is the direction of the board that we would like to see it different before we vote on the final numbers? I don't know, I'd leave that up to Lisa.
That's what we would prefer to have happen,
you want
because you will
consensus?
actually approve the budget as a board together.
Yep.
And we can do that with your direction without making it a formal vote.
Is there a consensus of the board present to change this to $80,000? The original 100,000 amount? Any comments?
I'm in favor.
Would you consider 70,000? That, we're not talking about this year's. We already have the contracts for this year, so that's 80, whether we covered or not. But in everything else in the general fund, we're lowering. And even a token lowering of 10,000, I would think, would be appropriate. And I'll, of course, go along with whatever the vote or the consensus is.
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding. We're at 100 right now.
Yes.
And at this point, we've got 80, so it's a reduction of 20,000. Because you've got 100 in the budget.
Well, I think reduction from what we did last year. So last year we did 80,000. If we have 100,000 currently in the budget, but if we're reducing it from last year, you would take it down to 70 or 60, because last year we did give 80. I don't know, was that right, Mr. Simmons? Did that?
Yes, it's kind of like you're eliminating positions that aren't filled, you know. But what you said is correct, right?
Yeah, the current budget is set at $100,000, right?
For 2021, yes, sir, that's what we have in there.
And so our recommendation would be to reduce that amount
Okay.
down to some figure.
Yes. Okay,
And
what
we're-
figure?
Yeah, and we're talking about either 80,000 or 70,000. What's the consensus of the board?
I'd consent with 70.
Well, we have a 2-2 tie, so Mayor, you have to break the tie.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So we had a 2-2 tie, so you have to break the tie.
No, you don't
Just
break that.
consenting.
How about we settle on
Actually,
another 75?
we have 3 at 70 now.
Who's the 3 at 70?
Three. Got the answer? He agreed.
I thought you agreed to say 80.
No, I looked at him and he pointed 70 is okay. Yeah. So we got 3 at 70.
How about 75?
I'll make a management decision. You have direction from consensus to 70,000.
Okay. And so you'll see that as a change on the budget when we bring it back before you for first read. Certainly. Is there anything else that you saw that you want to discuss? There was a question, I'll just bring it up for you. There was a question that was presented to me earlier before the meeting about the contra expense in the finance department that offsets payroll, and I want to explain to you what that is. We do the financial management for the Biosolids Coalition, and they turn around and they pay us for that. Also, we have coming into place this next year through the new TIF. It's a 2% administration for the finance department, certifying and managing those expenses as well. And so that's what the contra is. Also, we get a tourism tax, 2% administration, because we administer the tourism. In our, that we leave that in the general fund because it's quite large, but that also offsets our payroll because we administer all the tourism tax and stuff like that. So when you see that contra payroll, it's really an accounting function that shows you, yes, we have the payroll expenses, but a lot of our payroll expenses are offset by administration fees because of what we do in our office. So I just want to explain that. It was a great question. And so that is what that is. If you have any other questions like that we didn't cover today or that you think of later, feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to sit down with you or do a Zoom meeting or just email back and forth your questions, no problem. I'm happy to help.
For clarity, you will be presenting to us then a budget for 2021. The additional information you've given us is for us to be able to get a glimpse at the future if we don't change our ways, what might possibly happen.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think it's wise counsel to review what it looks down the road and to see there. I believe over the last 4 years, I've seen a lot of that. Looking back at the information I've seen a lot of recognizing there are issues and working on the budget and helping to make sure that it's more accurate and correct. I appreciate the amount of time. Each of these areas, all the safety, health, the socioeconomic, all the areas were discussed. The priority-based budgeting process was discussed. I know it's a lot of information, and you're right. You go over stuff quite a bit again and again, but we're there, and it's a good process, and I appreciate very much you're doing so. Are there any other comments or questions or recommended changes for the 2021 budget? All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Mike's going to come up and present the rates to you right now.
Can we take a break, Mayor? Oh, can we take a break?
Stan said 5
Stan?
minutes. Sure, we'll take a break. It's a good transition.
Okay. 5-minute break. thought we were ready, but we lost one, so I'll wait till Larry comes back. There we go. We're still missing Larry, right? Oh, there it is. All right. Review of water and sewer rates. I think, Mike, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think probably everybody has observed our water and sewer rate models except Alderman Whitus and Alderman C, I believe. Haven't had a chance yet, but what we do is just take a snapshot of our entire model, just the revenue and expense page, usually when we talk about it in these meetings. To explain the rate model just a little bit, back in 2010, 2011, when we formed utilities, we took on the task of trying to set the proper rates for water and sewer. And there had been a rate study started, and we worked with a consulting engineer to line out all of our assets, our costs, and our revenues at the time. And then we tried to do, every 2 years or 3 years, go back and look at it to see where we need to adjust rates. And we always had trouble making it balance, lasting through the three-year period. And in 2015, 2016, we sat down with our consulting engineer and asked if we could utilize their programs that they used whenever we did that initial rate study. They were fine with that. We created an Excel spreadsheet. It's a simple, basic Excel, but we include all of our capitals in one page, all of our line item expenses, all of our budgets in another section, and then everything pulls into the revenue and expense page. And then we coordinate with finance, of course, on the revenues. They set the revenues. We discuss those, and we have in our revenues this year in the 2021 column, which is in blue, the revenues that are set by finance, and they have included anticipated cost or rate adjustments for 2021. We incorporated the same rate adjustments. As Jamie spoke, she wanted to make sure that we set a balance. And we went through our 2021, 2022 operational expenditures through numerous cuts on several different occasions to try and get it down as low as we could possibly get it. As Stan mentioned, we cut $900,000 out of the 2020 budget just to get us through the COVID. And you've heard a lot of discussion about unrealistic or we can't make it work. Our crews have done an awesome job keeping our costs down this year. We're pretty close to meeting. I know I've had to come to Jamie and John and Stan and ask for a couple of budget amendments for some equipment, some facilities that we just absolutely had to get up and going this year that wasn't anticipated. And they were gracious enough to let us bring it to the board, and the board approved. So we're staying as close to the COVID budget as we possibly can. And with this budget, I'll just try and go through each line, and I'll use the pointer. It's kind of hard to discuss where it's at. And Chad Forrester is always after me to try and point something out because I'm as shaky as a leaf when it comes to pointing stuff with a pointer. But he's going to get his opportunity now to watch me shake a little bit. As I mentioned, in the 2021, we utilized the revenues provided by finance, which is the first line. And their numbers also include the rate increase that's anticipated for water for 2021. And we also just stayed with that revenue projection for 2022. And then beyond that, we let the model go ahead and do the normal calculations. We only allow a 0.5% growth in water sewer. We do have a lot of development going on, new connections going on, but when we have new connections, sometimes it may replace some other business that was there, and components that are put in today are a lot more, conservative on, what water is used, a lot better efficiency, I should say, in what's put in. And so our growth revenue in water sewer is sometimes slowed by that. Plus, our folks on the sewer side have made a lot of improvements in the sewer system and started to slow down some of the groundwater. So our flows coming into our treatment plants are coming down too. So there's some improvements going on there. I'm sorry, hit the wrong button. Second line down are the lines that the amounts that we have come from the line item budgets. We have a expenditure for 2021 of $3.129 million in water for operations and maintenance. So looking at those numbers, it's going to leave us a deficit from the revenues to the expenditures of $298,000. We have left the line item in for the normal operational capital expenditures, but we are not pulling that into expenditures for this result. We just want to make sure that it stays there, that whatever we don't do now doesn't go away. It just has to get rolled into another year. And we've done that. But for the model, we've left it there for now just to show what it would have been had we stayed with our normal revenues and everything was normal. We have a 2% rate increase proposed for 2021. If we would have included the cost for all the capitals, given the revenue that we anticipate to have, it would have taken a 22% increase overall. Just not realistic. We can't do that. So we're holding back on the capitals. And as Jamie Stan has said, it's also not realistic. We may have to come back with a budget amendment to replace some piece of equipment that we can't make it through next year. Jamie and I have discussed that. We have a plan of how we would fund that. And it really depends on how we end this year also. So there's a lot of contingencies there, but we think we have a plan in place to where we can at least fund some budget amendments if we have to. The revenues, the reserve lines that we show in the model, and I might point out too, if there's ever any discrepancies in revenues, expenditures, reserves, finance numbers always trump. These are exercise numbers that we used to determine rates, and if there's any discrepancies, we go with the finance numbers. We're normally always very close, so it won't be that drastic of a change if there is any discrepancy, but finance always, we go with our numbers. With a 2% increase, we show what the base rates are. Right now for a residential home would be $10.10 for a base rate for a 3/4 inch meter. It would go to $10.30, so 20 cents. If you're a single person at home, elderly maybe, where you use a basic minimum, you're looking at about a 20 cents a month increase in your bill. And then those lower numbers are based on meter size. We have a ratio that we go by that was recommended by our rate consultant that we charge various base minimums by the meter size that serves the business. And we also charge system connection charges by that same ratio, that if a new business or home connects, it's based off the size of meter that we charge that connection charge for. So there's consistency as to how we arrive at what we charge. The sewer follows the same principles. In 21, we're predicting just over $4 million that would be produced through revenue. And just like finance, we are factoring in the amount that would be produced by a rate increase. Second line is the projected expenditures. and also leaves a deficit for the year. We also left the number in for the capitals that would have normally gone forward, but we are not pulling those numbers into this factor. As I mentioned earlier, the revenues, I kind of had a hard time coming off of our plan because we had a plan in place that we've had in place for a number of years. And at the end of 2019, we were matching right up with that plan. And when we started 2020, we started off very well. And we were going, I believe we would have met the plan again with the rate increases. And then the world all changed in March, of course. And we had some hard discussions about rate increases this year. And my initial thought was we don't want to raise rates any more than we were going to. As the year went on, I came to realize that the revenues are not going to be any more than what finance was projecting. I was hoping that it could be beat, but it's not. They've done a very good job of lining out revenues. So Jamie, whenever she looked at balancing the budget, she indicated that the 4% or somewhere is not enough to make it balance, and we need to make the budget balance. So they used a 7-cent, and we adopted that and put that in our rate plan. If I go back just to the water, it looks like the 2% is not enough because we have every year deficit in the red line going across. We have, considering that we don't have to pull and do any of the capitals that we're not pulling into this fund, in the 700,000, realistically, we're probably going to have to, where it looks like we're going to have a $119,000 surplus at the end. I can't tell you that that's probably going to happen. So with the 2 and the 7%, we have it balanced, and we agree with that. It looks like we probably need to maybe reduce the sewer and increase the water, but before all of this hit, we were in very good shape on water. We were very well balanced with just cost of living increases at the 2%, but we still had growth to do in wastewater because we still don't have the ability to cover all of the sewer collection system with the flushing, the repair, the root removal, things of that nature that Department of Natural Resources recommends that we do. They expect us to go through our system every 5 years completely. It would take us 8 to 10 right now. So that's why we were still had higher rate increases for sewer to get us in line with what we needed to do. So we're held back a little bit on this, even with that, because it would take some additional personnel. And I didn't point it out, but in the green numbers, which may be a little hard to see, those were proposed new positions and new costs. Those are not being pulled into this model either. It's not even being considered right now. But at some point, we will have to do that. Lo and behold, we have new regulations coming down on the water side too. So in a year or two, we're probably going to have to look at funding that. Mr. Manning and my staff have been looking at some options that we might be able to incorporate some help from other departments. Basically, we're going to have a program where all fire hydrants are inspected, repaired, flushed every year. And we have 4,000 hydrants in town. We don't have the ability to do that right now. And we also have 3,000 valves in our system right now. And the new regulations require that every 10 years, we have to go through, clean out any debris that's in valve boxes, exercise valves, repair valves, keep all of that information for Department of Natural Resources inspections. So that means about 300 valves a year we have to go through that process. And we have an exercising machine, just a manual machine, that it functions, but it doesn't have all the abilities that really we need. So we had proposed before all of this some equipment to help expedite some of those inspections and maintenance and repairs. We're going to have to get to the point where we run 300 valves a year through this program, and we're doing about 120 right now. We spend a lot of time with our water distribution crew repairing 12-inch water mains. Our system's getting older. We've got a lot of antiquated lines that are too small. We also have in our plans to start upsizing those lines and following probably the Highway 76 upgrade, which is a main artery for lines in town. We need to get into neighborhoods and start working on lines there. Those are tourism tax related. And as Jamie has pointed out, you all are very aware, tourism tax is way down. So those programs are held up too. So. With a 7% rate increase, which is what it takes to balance everything on a residential customer base rate, we would go from $7.50 to $8.03. And then a residential rate would go from $2.38 per 1,000 gallons to $2.55. Back on the water, the rate per 1,000 would go from $2.59 to $2.64, 5 cents.
Mike?
Yes.
Because of the compounding nature, with that 7% in there, did it actually reduce the percentages needed in future years, or was that static?
In our models, we left it at the plan of 3%.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly where, Jamie, if you left it at 3 or where for the future, if you raised it. Okay, all right. So that's where it's at right now. We know that every community is different. Everybody has their own reason for the rates for water they charge, but we always take a look at where we're at statewide. So we have this year 69 cities that we have compared with, and where that places us with water rate increases. The highest would be on the left side column, and then the lower rates would be on the right side. Right now, for just the water consumption for a resident in Branson with a 3/4 inch meter, with the base rate and the monthly charge using 5,000 gallons of water, the water bill would be $17.87. With a 2% increase, it would go to $18.23 with a 36-cent overall increase. A question?
Mike, before you move on from this chart, I would like to ask if an asterisk or something can be placed, because I go through the same spiel every time I see this chart. When somebody looks at the chart, I think they get the impression that, well, look how low we are compared to all these others.
Right.
And in fairness, the residents in Branson, every time they go eat, shopping, anything they do in Branson, they're paying the additional 4% in tourism tax.
Right.
And I don't know that there's one city up there that their residents are having to pay that extra 4%. And that extra 4% was to offset these costs.
Right.
So by presenting this without an asterisk explaining that difference, I don't know that it's as accurate as I think it could be, if that's fair.
I think so. That's well noted. I mean, you mentioned that last year, and we take that in consideration. We didn't I don't know that finance has ever done any kind of calculation as to an estimate of what someone spends if they do something along the lines that are affected by tourism tax.
I just think it'd be fair to compare community to community.
Right.
Thank you.
I think, too, if a community like ourselves has the luxury of a tourism tax and have the amount of infrastructure that we have to have for a population of 10,000. We have infrastructure for a population of 80,000. If we have the luxury of the tourism tax, we had better well be on the lower side of everybody else. And that has always been our goal, particularly with residents, to make sure that we stay in the lower end of any comparisons of the state.
Great point. Thank you.
Just a comment too. It's tough to kind of compare situations. Obviously, the tourism tax is a choice. If they want to go somewhere and eat or go somewhere, do something, that's a choice that they make. But I agree that it's, from just looking at it from that kind of perspective, it's a negative perspective. But in truth, there's so many more amenities that are available to our citizens in this community because of us being able to build to an 80,000 population in regard to shopping and all the other things that are there. But for us to be in that lower rate, I'm looking at it too from what kind of ground and soil do they have around different places. And I would think that maintaining and keeping water lines and sewer lines be a lot different when you didn't have rock. And so I'm thinking that that's part of the cost that we use the tourism tax for on the infrastructure.
The major.
Because we got rock as opposed to either on the upper plain or Myrtle Beaches on the sand.
And we want to keep the burden off of the residents to have to build that infrastructure, rock or no rock. It's driven by the tourism base, so the cost should come mostly from the tourism base, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, plus we also have the 1%, so I agree with Ed that some things are a choice of our residents, what they can and can't do, but going to the pharmacy, Walmart, grocery shopping, there's things that our residents don't have a choice, and they're paying the extra tax that these other communities are not.
No, that's
not true?
Yeah, there are certain things like pharmacy and groceries, we don't have the tax on it.
It would be exempt. It would be
Doesn't have the
exempt.
tourism tax on it.
From the 1% tax.
All from the 1%, yeah.
I can guarantee probably almost every city has some kind of tax, yeah.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah, we had not even taken that into consideration until Alderman Milton brought that up last year. It's a good point, and it is something to consider. This is the comparison for our commercial customers. This would be based off of a 2-inch meter using 100,000 gallons of water. The 2-inch meter in our commercial customer base is the majority. We have some that are larger, maybe up to 53 and 4-inch meters, and I think about 9 right now, 6-inch meters, but the majority is a 2-inch. Average use is going to be somewhere in the area of 100,000. There are some less, some more. Right now, we have a monthly charge of $431.17. We would go to $439.79, an increase of $8.62, which is, of course, higher than the residential rate, but in reality, those costs are probably passed on to the tourism base. Our commercial rates are higher than our residential rates because of that. Not only do we in water and sewer depend on the tourist base for the tourism tax, but we also depend on them for the consumption that they use. So it's very dependent, and that has been probably the biggest impact on us this year, is that I'm sure finance would agree that their residential consumption has remained steady and in some cases may have even increased while we were all at home. But the commercial rate, where our consumption may only be down 20%, our revenue may be down somewhat more because our major loss is in the tourism-based commercial consumption. This would be on the sewer with a 7% increase. It would take us from $14.64 per thousand or per month to $15.66, which is going to be $1.02 per month on our residential customers. And on the sewer commercial, it would take us from $489.78 to $524.06, a difference of $34.28. And we do have the combined, the water and sewer total for the residential customer would be $1.38 per month increase. And on the commercial with a 2-inch meter using 100,000 gallons of water, would be $42.91. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think that's the rates that we probably need to go with to make it balance for 2021. And then we'll have to go from there as to what, hopefully, be optimistic and it improves better than what we expect. But if not, then this definitely takes care of us through the next year. As we fly away, I'll answer any questions.
There for questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Mr. Simmons.
It sounds like you discussed all possibilities here. Certainly in the water side, 2% is barely enough to cover inflation in a normal year. So
right.
I don't see where anybody could have much complaint about that. On the sewer side, the 7% is considerably more than we had projected before we knew what kind of a year this was going to be. Did you look at not quite so much increase this year? We've got a good reserve in there, and that reserve is increasing the way you show it.
Right.
Did you look at maybe increasing that less and increasing the next year or two a little more to give people, I think motels are probably a good part of our consumption there. Mm-hmm. And motels are one of our sectors that's having the most problem right now. And so a large increase to them is maybe much more important to them in this time period than it would be in a normal year. Did you discuss that?
We've looked at every option that we could possibly look at, of course. The 7% could be spread out. We wouldn't balance in 2021, I don't think.
You would have to take money out of the reserves, right?
Yeah, we would
do that.
Hit our reserves.
But we do have a pretty substantial reserve.
I might say on the reserves, those numbers are the 2019 year end.
Your Honor,
Yes,
we probably need to take a break.
Oh. Losing people.
because we,
Okay.
do we need to leave, Larry? Well, we'll take a break for 2 minutes then. All right, she's saying. All right.
Thank you.
To adjourn? Adjourn. We're ready to start back up? Just so for explanation purposes, and Larry and I just talking, we only have 4 aldermen present, so if an alderman needs to step out, then that's why Lisa brought up the point that we lost our quorum, so we had to stop. And so that's just the explanation for you. It's not that way on the committees, but it is on the Board of Aldermen.
And I wanted to apologize. It was a important personal call.
I'm just up here to explain the fund balance. So it appears that there's 62 million in fund balance. Majority of that fund balance is assets. Because the water sewer is a proprietary account, the unrestricted balance of that fund balance that you see is only 29% or less than 4 million, and that's as of the end of 2019. And so when we calculate 2020, you're going to see that less. And we try to maintain it at a 30% level, the unrestricted portion. So when you see the fund balance and it shows you 60 plus million, that is not spendable dollars. That is major assets that are accounted for in that reserve. So what we were challenged with this year is with the COVID financials and the physical health and all of that we presented, water sewer fell below the 20% level with their unrestricted available amount, and our projections ended it at 16%. Thank the good Lord, we were very conservative in those projections, and I believe that we're going to end the year higher than those projections. But that's one of the reasons why I said we need to make sure that we balance those operations this year, because this year and the end of this year is going to be a turning point, and we have to make sure that that unrestricted level is above your 20%. So sometimes for the public purposes, you look at that and you say, well, their fund balance is over 60 million. We got money to spend. Majority of that is wrapped up in assets. It's not spendable money unless you turn around and sell those assets, and you don't want to do that because a lot of it's your infrastructure. So I hope I help explain that. But if you take it over a couple of years, you're creating an unbalanced in this year, which creates an unbalanced in next year, and down the road at some point you're going to have to do a jump in order to get it back on the right track. That's all I wanted to say. I didn't want to infringe upon Mike's presentation. But
so on the chart, and I may have been looking at the wrong line or not looking at all the lines, but it did show, 45, 50% reserve, but that includes the assets. That
yes,
percentage.
yes. And we have it broken down internally. I have to do that for our financial reports that are audited, and it breaks it down into net of assets, net of related debt, and then what debt you have against that. And then everything else after that is unrestricted, and that's basically the cash that's available to spend in that fund. And so since we've just gone through that, I know that it's less than 4 million, and it's less than 30% for the end of this year for sure. For end of 2019, it was less. So the end of this year, it's going to be even less. So we've got to just really be careful this year, how we end this year and going into next year, because next year, in order to balance, it's got to be at 7%. Otherwise, if we take it down, you're going to have a $100,000 gap or a $140,000 gap, and that gap is only going to escalate as you go out in years. So I would just encourage you to think about it that way, because if we take it out a couple of years, the gap grows bigger. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. I just misread the charts looking at that, so
Yes, sir.
I was mistaken. Thank you.
Jamie, real quick, since you mentioned that, would you be able to provide us, when we look at those reserve fund balances, provide us the difference or the calculations of how much is capital and...
Certainly. It just takes me unhiding a line, because I already do that, so it's not extra work.
Unhide the line. Thank you.
Well, sometimes when we didn't hide the line, it confused the public and they didn't understand. So we hid it to try to make it less confusing, but I can certainly unhide it. It's not a big deal.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, your recommendation then is a 2% increase in water rates and a 7% increase in sewer rates.
That is correct.
That's correct.
I do have one quick question.
Well, on the 7% ask, what was the adjusted number that, that was unrealistic that we would have had to do? Just like you showed us on the water, it was like 28%?
The number that I did not pull into from capitals,
Well, based on where we sit now, you showed the 2% on the water, but it was like it should have been more like 28%.
Oh, okay.
The
Yeah.
adjusted
We'll look at that.
for sewer. It was hard to read from over here. Yeah, on that.
Pretty small print, isn't it?
Yeah, if we would have kept in the expenditures for the 707,000, it would have took the 7% plus an additional 13.7%.
Okay. That was hard to read.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarity. All right. Any other comments? At this point, we are to the point of adjournment. We do have 3 separate entities involved, so we'll have to adjourn each of the meetings. And the order that they have on my chart is the motion to adjourn from the Board of Aldermen.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right. We have a pass. Motion to adjourn the Capital Improvement Committee. Do I have a motion? The motion's been made. Second?
Second.
Second's been made. Any discussion? Please vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, passes. Motion to adjourn Budget and Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second's been made. Please vote. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. The yeses have it. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you guys for coming.